Welcome, artists, to Monet Cafe Studio. Take a deep breath and enjoy this episode of Artistic Meditations. This is a painting experience that I love to bring every so often, kind of when I need a break or just want to play. In these lessons, I typically pull out products that I may not have used in a while or ever, and just play and try things in different ways, letting myself have the freedom to paint without the rules. I think you're going to love some of these fun new painting discoveries I made, and I hope you can carve out some creative time for yourself to enjoy the beautiful blessing of artistic creation. Here's a little sneak peek at some of the fun things we'll be learning. A new underpainting discovery I made. Also, we will be using stencils along with iridescent pastels. The sparkle in this painting is fantastic. Wait till you see at the end. But I wanted to share that I'm making this video available in the full length for both my patrons and my YouTube subscribers. Now, patrons, you are getting some extra goodies, reference images, my color notes, and of course, the ability to share your creations with me. And of course, if you're not a patron, I'd love for you to join the family. It's so easy. It's $5 a month. And right now, until January 31st, there is a coupon code for 10% off my annual memberships. So I'd love for you to come and join our beautiful community of artists. This lesson was inspired by this little sketch I've kept for years now, and I stumbled across it when I was moving into my new studio, and I put it up on my idea board, and I just knew I wanted to do something with it. So what I did was put it into ChatGPT along with some other reference colors and palettes and images, and had it change my sketch into a concept image. And this series is about trying new things, and I've recently been inspired by an artist. Her name is Rachel Estrada. She's on Instagram at The Pasteling Fox. Now, she'll just take your breath away, not only with her art, but with her beauty. I recently stumbled across her work, and as a pastel artist, she has such a unique method of painting. And what I particularly loved was the way she does her underpaintings. If you've followed my channel for long, you know I'm such a fan of these loose and dreamy beginnings. And she has a way of creating an underpainting with an acrylic wash. And from what I've been exploring, what I could see from her videos, she uses alcohol and acrylic in an amazing way to create these loose and muted, very organic beginnings. And since my series, Artistic Meditations, is about trying new things, I thought I'd give it a try. I truly love her results, and I thought this would be fun. I'm going to try a lot of other things in this lesson too. I knew I would need a water-friendly surface since I'm going to start the same way Rachel did. So I'm using this Fisher 400 soft pastel paper. It's a sanded paper, so I can get a lot of layers, but it's water-friendly. Now, they don't make this anymore, but there are a lot of other alternatives. If you've been painting in pastel long, you know you could use UArt 400, Pastel Matte, Luxe Archival, and various other surfaces. It seemed to me that Rachel was using quite a bit of golden fluid acrylics, and I only had two colors with this product. This one is the quinacridone nickel azo gold, and also I had the iridescent bright gold. I don't think I'd ever tried it before. They actually don't even make that quinacridone color anymore, but you could use any bright deep orange. Now, I did have a set of Daler Rowney acrylics, just acrylic paint. I've never used them before. I think someone actually gifted them to me. And so I'm going to pull out some colors that I think will work for the general palette idea. So I'm going to choose some colors based on this image that I created again with ChatGPT, but I want to share with you one of the images I shared along with my sketch to get ChatGPT to recreate this image was a rug that I loved. I love the pattern. So that's where all those little patterns and things come from. All right. I knew along with the golden and the iridescent color that I wanted some blues. You can see it in my reference image. This is a Prussian blue. It's a deep blue. I love it. That leans a little turquoise. And this is another blue that I can't remember the name of this one, but it also leans a little turquoise. And I thought I'd play with that one too. So I have these two blues. Now I saw there were some beautiful deep colors here, and my quinacridone orangey color wasn't really dark enough. So I got this dark brown, and I'm not even worrying about the names of these colors because this is Artistic Meditations. You guys just get creative. I saw there was also a magenta color, but this set didn't have a pretty magenta. So I combined a pretty cool red with a purple to get a color that was a little deeper magenta. The red was too red, the purple was too purple, but look what happens when I combine them. It really does mute it out a little bit and tone it down, and I really love that color. I have some glass dishes for mixing my color. Because this is loose and spontaneous and organic, I chose some large brushes, and I think I initially just used the black brush, the one that's more textural. I do add another brush later I'll talk about. And I noticed that Rachel looked like she was using alcohol. A lot of her videos were little clips on Instagram and very fast, but I use alcohol all the time because it dries fast. So this is what I witnessed when she would do her underpainting, is that she would put a fluid acrylic in a little container, and then she would squeeze in some alcohol. This is the first time I've ever done this, so it was all brand new. And that's what this series is about. Artistic Meditations. Again, it's like painting like a kid again and just having some fun. And I find that when we explore like this, we often just loosen up more and we have more fun. And so many times our results are much more impressionistic, painterly, and spontaneous. So I wasn't even sure what to expect, but I was having some fun. I realized it was a little bright. I do love this rusty orangey color, but I wanted a little more depth. So I added the brown that I had chosen. It's kind of a darker brown. And I like often for my colors to mix on the surface. So I don't mix it to death in its little mixing tray there, the glass dish. I just kind of keep adding alcohol. I realized it did need to be more liquefied. So I've sped it up here so you can kind of see the process. And I did notice too that sometimes Rachel would actually add her alcohol first to the surface. I do that often too. Sorry for my ring light overhead shining onto the surface. Now I'm adding the Prussian blue, and I put a little dollop in my glass dish. I added some alcohol. I know now that I kind of need a decent amount of alcohol, but I'm still kind of testing things out here. And I did add a little more alcohol. I clipped it out there. But I noticed that when I started brushing it like this, it was blending with the beautiful orange and brown. And what happens when you mix blue with like golden colors? It's going to turn more green. So that was okay. Again, this is about experimenting. And I kind of was liking some of the earthy green, neutral colors. And that was one of the things I liked about Rachel's underpaintings, is that they were so organic and neutral. And I'm creating an ellipse of sorts around the edges because I often like the perimeter of my painting to be a little bit darker. I also remembered that Rachel did a lot of splatters, and I learned a lot by doing this and ways that I think I will do it differently next time. But I was trying to splatter it. I had a lot of alcohol in my brush, but notice the splatters are kind of small. And I've learned now that if I get a different type of brush, this one holds a lot of fluid in it. It's actually a Chinese watercolor brush. And I'm going to do this again and add a lot of alcohol and really just let this brush just dollop these puddles of alcohol. And much of what I did was unexpected, and I blended and moved some of the paint around and just played and had fun, and basically just wanted to get a very loose and earthy beginning to this painting. And I did have this one other color I wanted to try, the other golden fluid acrylic. Fluid acrylic just means it's very fluid. It's not super thick. So that's why it moves around better. And this is the one that was that beautiful iridescent gold, and it's kind of light. So I didn't want these marks that were so punctuated, and I kept just rolling my brush around and playing and blending things in and having fun. Again, that's what this is about. I added more alcohol, I did some splatters, and just wanted this loose and beautiful beginning. I was loving this very earthy and muted color, and I decided to splatter a little bit more of the turquoise. And I was inspired. These colors just really got me excited, and the whole process was fun. I did shoot it with a blow dryer, so it was nice and dry before I started. Now I need to get in my sketch. I'm using a pastel pencil. This is just a Faber-Castell. It's kind of a muted, dark green, like a blue-green. And I often like to just block in my images. I look at my places on the sides of the paper where things fall, just to kind of get a roadmap. And I never like to sketch with too many parameters, but I've learned over the years to kind of measure proportionately. I can kind of see where spaces are and where things fall, especially when your reference image is about the same proportions as your painting surface. In other words, I know that that chickadee on the left, it's not quite in the middle on the left side. It's a little bit down. The one on the right is a little higher. And you just learn these things the more that you sketch. So I am speeding up the sketch section, but I highly recommend you work on sketching. Don't stress out if you're not good at it at first. I was not good at sketching at first, but it just takes a lot of play. I don't like to say work. Play with sketching. Do little sketching, and the more you do, the better you'll get. And notice that my sketch is not detailed at all. It's basically just the positioning of these little birds. Now, these are the colors I started with. If you're a patron of mine on my Patreon page, I am going to give you my color notes, and I am popping up the reference image, which is the final painting. My painting is quite a bit different from my little ChatGPT inspired image from my sketch, so I thought it'd be best just to put my painting up as a reference. Now I am starting with, it's a little beigey taupe color, but isn't it funny how lavender it looks when I apply it? In my hand, it looks kind of taupe, but when I applied it, it looks a little bit lavender, right? And I think that's because of all the gold and green around it. So now I'm using this pretty little brownish tan color, and I'm just getting in some warmth. These little chickadee birds have it's just such a recognizable marking. They have dark heads, they are dark, a little band around their neck, and their bodies are rather light, but obviously we're going to get some shadowing and shading in certain areas. And I wanted to add a little bit of these brown and pretty umber colors because the background was so golden, and I thought it would be nice color echoing going on. So now I have a dark, a dark blue actually, and it's really muted. It's not very saturated. It's just kind of a neutral dark blue. And I believe this is a Terry Ludwig pastel. So this is a stage that's just called blocking in. I want you to notice as this progresses that I'm not focusing on birds, feathers, or anything that's overly detailed. I'm getting in my main values. I know the body is somewhat light with a little bit of three-dimensional shadowing and shading for, you know, just where the body curves. But there are areas where there are some darker values, and I'm even getting in little teeny marks for the feet. And getting these little birds' feet are so delicate and so gestural. You do not want their feet thick. I put a little shadow around behind the tail there that's coming behind the bird. And I'm still blocking in just some of these muted neutral colors in the face, on the head, in the body. And I literally zone out and just look at shapes at this point. Shapes and values, even more than color. What are these shapes? Where are these shapes? And I was actually using to paint from, of course, the Chat GPT image, but I was using my sketch. You see it, you kind of see part of it over to the right on just the little creamy paper there. I was using my sketch more than the Chat GPT image because my sketch really just felt like it had gesture and life to it. Now, this is a tough part, getting the eye in. The eye is almost always going to be dark with birds, and you want to get the shape and the position accurate. And with these big old chunky pastels, that can often be hard to do. So don't get too frustrated. Do a lot of little studies. Like I said, with sketching, it all gets better the more that you do. But the eye is crazy because it's a dark eye and it's also got dark feathers and little crevices around it. So you're just always kind of finessing the little shape of the eye. And there is a little bit of a highlight around the rim, almost like birds. They don't really have an eyelid, but they have a little, almost like eyeliner around the top and underneath that you can often use a value that's just a little bit lighter, like a lavender, like a middle value lavender to line the eye. And you'll see me zoom in and do that in a minute. And as you can tell, I'm still just blocking in. I'm looking at where the darkest values are. It's right underneath that little patch or side portion of light on his face. Underneath is where that dark is. So I'm going to do just kind of the same thing with this other chickadee. I also love how when you're an artist, you kind of can't help but explore, examine, and study nature. Because, you know, if you're going to be painting these birds, you start to really learn the patterns of these birds. And you learn so much more about our world, our beautiful creation that God has given us. And it's amazing how many times people who aren't artists, we just go through life and sometimes you don't even notice what the sunrise was like or what the sky looked like in the evening. And we're just all so busy, busy, busy. So it's wonderful to be an artist and really just start observing, enjoying, and worshiping our God who gave us all these beautiful little creatures and landscapes. And the Lord truly is the original artist, and life is so much better when we can just praise Him and create from His creation. I just love it. So you can see I'm still just doing the same blocking in stage now with the other chickadee on the right. Notice too that my blocking in, everything is still very basic. I'm getting in form and using value to give that, you know, just a tad of that three-dimensional feel with form. I'm using this purplish lavender color. It's a very muted neutral color. And I'm just getting it much like you would do, you know how when you learn to paint a sphere and you know where to put your shadowy colors and your middle values and your light values. It's kind of the same thing with any element, really. So again, I'm just getting in the basic colors, values, and form of these birds. Now, when I first started as a pastel artist, really it was the beginning of my art career. I always loved art. It's probably like a lot of you guys watching and subscribers to my channel, is you probably loved art when you were young. You probably just loved color. But most likely, if you didn't have an art career or major in art or pursue it, most likely life just pulled you away in beautiful ways. You know, you had a family, you had a career, you did something else in your life. And then often that longing to paint just is still there. And I find so often that if you're a parent, that's the most beautiful job of all. But it's definitely one that is, you sacrifice a lot of your own loves. But often when your kids get a little older, you're able to carve in that little time to explore this, but you don't really know what you're doing yet. And neither did I. That was a long tangent there, but I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I loved it. And so I had to learn all of this on my own. I literally learned almost everything I know art-wise from YouTube, or actually before YouTube, I was learning from these other forums. So I share that to say, if I can do it, you can do it. But when I was first starting to paint, I would have tried to paint every teeny little detail of these birds. I would try to paint the feathers and the little feet exactly right. And my paintings looked very tight and it looked like things were pasted on, almost like a paint by number. And it was through these years of learning that I learned more about how to get that impressionistic style. And it comes from blocking in, like I've talked about, and a layering process with soft pastels, also with oil and acrylic, a little bit with watercolor. It's a layering process. We are layering colors on top of each other so they can interact and layer much like they do in nature. nature is not, if you look out in the world, it's not like a paint by number. Even if you look at a photograph, colors are all intermingling, bouncing off of each other, and that's how we paint. I think you'll notice that all of this, except for the sketch and a little bit at the beginning, has been real time. And I'm making it available for my patrons on my Patreon page and for my subscribers on my YouTube channel, Monet Cafe Studio. So I just wanted to gift that to everyone, and you don't have to be a patron to get all of the content on this one. So I'm going to add this lovely music while I paint a bit. Again, this is Artistic Meditations, and it's about just slowing down and enjoying this beautiful process. And I will be back when I start to add the stencils. Yes, I'm adding stencils to this painting using pan pastels. I have quite a few patrons of mine who have asked for more videos on pan pastels. You're going to love what I do with these stencils. It was so fun. So enjoy the music. And if you'd like to become a patron, you know how. It's always in the description of this video. But this full video is for everyone. All right, now it's time to have some fun. I decided to pull out some stencils. I've tried this rarely before, but I remembered that it worked pretty well using pan pastels. So I thought I would try it again, and this time with iridescent pan pastels. Pan pastels are so fun. They're like little compacts of color. Notice how I hold this to my board just with a large binder clip, and you just can paint with it vertically like this. These are the little soft tools, they're called. This one's larger. You can tell I've used this one a lot. And they're just these little sponges that you use with the pan pastels to apply them. If you don't know much about pan pastels, there is so much education to be learned from their site now. They were bought by Golden Company, the Golden Art Company. And so I'll have a link in the description of this video where you can learn more, and of course links to these products. You can see I'm using the larger sponge, and even though it looked really dirty, you can wash these and reuse them. I just kind of wipe them off usually. Oh my goodness, look at that texture. I'll zoom in just a minute so you can see. So I'm just kind of strategically placing this in different areas around the birds, and also the little palettes of color up there, not all of those are iridescent, just the kind of orangey bronze color and the light yellow color. And I really do love this technique. Now, this was with the turquoise and the green, and I think I got inspired from my reference image that, again, I used ChatGPT to get creative with that photo of the rug with all of the texture and patterns. And so I'm just having fun. And I think often, as especially beginner artists, we forget to play. We're just trying to follow the rules and trying to learn. And that's all good. Don't get me wrong. There are some things, foundations you should learn as an artist. But sometimes we get a little burnt out and frustrated. Have you heard of that? Artists saying they're in a rut. So this is a way to get out of that rut and do what I believe the Lord wants us to do, is just to enjoy his amazing creation. And we are created in his image, and he is the master creator. So I think he loves it. And we just play and have fun. And look at this magenta. So as you can see, I just get a little bit of it on the sponge, and I'm holding the stencil in place. You don't want it to wiggle around. And I just kind of lift it up sometimes to check if my marks or my stencil marks are coming out okay. And if you've followed my channel very long, or you're a patron of mine, you know that I do a lot of landscapes, but I love to do paintings of animals, and I also love a bit of whimsy. And don't you think this just gives that little whimsical feel? And I ended up loving this color palette. I think a lot of it had to do with that gorgeous underpainting. You can still see those golden, almost some rusty colors from that brown I used, and that pretty color, the turquoise blues that blended to make a little bit of that earthy green. So that was my goal, was to get a very muted beginning, and I think it really helped. That gave me the artistic license to have fun and explore with some more punctuated or saturated color as I added these stencils. And by the way, if you're still watching at this point, I would love it if you would leave me a comment on this video. I love to hear your feedback. I love to hear if you're going to try this. I often learn from you guys. There are some pretty experienced pan pastel artists that often leave me comments. And if you have any questions, plus it really does help YouTube to share this video more often when it gets a lot of activity from the comments. So I would appreciate that. Now I want to develop the scene a little bit more, and I'm breaking out something I don't use often, which is pastel pencils. And I just want to really get more of a sketch in here of some more foliage, branches, more leaves, and just some secondary focal points. Now, the chickadees are obviously the main focal point, and I will develop them further. Again, I hope you're enjoying this real time. That's a thing you can let me know in the comments. You can always speed this up if you're just, wanting, turn my voice down, the volume down, because I'll sound kind of strange. But if you just want to zip through this, and or you can move the video further down the line. But let me know if you like the real time. I do have a lot of that over on my Patreon page. And I tell you guys too, if you're ever watching one of my other videos and it's just a little too sped up for you, you can do the same thing in YouTube. You can slow it down. All you do is you go to where you're watching it in your viewer window of YouTube, and you look for the little gear icon. I think it's in the lower right on a computer and the upper right on a phone, somewhere like that. Click the gear icon, you'll see playback speed, and you can change it. So that's always handy. All right, I've zoomed in here a little bit more for you to see my development more of some of these branches. And this is now where I'm starting to give more attention to my focal elements. Again, these birdies and kind of their elements that are in their nearest proximity. I know I want a bit more shadow on this branch. I'm adding a little purple, a darker purple. That's a great color for shadows. It's so much more interesting than like a dark gray or a black. So I'm giving also a little bit of purple. This is a little bit of a lighter value purple underneath these birds. It's not going to stay quite this saturated with purple, but it's a nice base. Again, pastels are about layering. And I'm putting this darker purple magenta, kind of feathering it in the direction of their little heads, how they would curve in between what looks like black. The color that I used earlier that looks like black, I can't remember if I mentioned it. It's actually the Terry Ludwig eggplant color. It's a dark, dark, dark purple. It's one of the best darks you can get. And darks that are purple or other colors are so much more interesting than just using black. I had sketched in a few little leaves. I grabbed some greens. I have some cool greens in different values and some warmer greens. I don't use all of those greens, by the way. So I'm first getting in a darker, kind of somewhat neutral, earthy dark green. And I looked at some reference images of leaves on trees, and these, and I'm not sure what variety this would be. They almost reminded me, the ones I was looking at anyway, of, you know what a peach tree leaves look like? They're kind of long and thinner and tapered at the end. So again, you can break out your artistic license and just create some leaf shapes. Make sure that you give a variety. Think about how they would turn, how some will be reaching up, some will be angled down, some might be a little bit on the side or further away. They're going to be smaller. And the more you examine nature, the more these things will come naturally when you paint. I am literally just using my imagination for these, but I'm thinking sometimes leaves are in little clusters, you know, like a little sprig that comes out of the branch. And the reason I got some of the different values and colors of greens is because I'm going to layer those colors strategically based on light and shadow. Now, this is a lighter green that I'm giving a little layer on the tops of some of the leaves, like the sunlight from behind is filtering through. And then I'm going to use my cooler greens that you saw in my hand at the front. Cooler greens are a little more teal and turquoise. They lean a little more blue. And those will be ones that would be a bit more in the shadow. So they're not catching as much of the sunlight. And right now at this point, I'm still very interpretive in my mark making, keeping a very light touch and realizing that I want this painting to guide me along. You know, I don't have anything set in stone in my imagination right now. I'm looking in little areas where I feel like branches and leaves might just feel like they want to live there. And I always love when I bring these artistic meditation episodes for my patrons on my Patreon page, because you guys, if you're a patron of mine, I am always amazed at what you do when you just, you know, say, I'm just going to paint and enjoy this. And I hear your comments and read your comments, and I know you love it. And I've watched some of you really take your art to new levels when you realize, wait a minute, I am an artist. I have an artistic license. And often you know more than you think you know. So you can create and enjoy this journey without always having to reproduce from another artist tutorial. So I've added enough leaves for now, and I'm going to darken some of the corners. Think of it as corners. It's like an ellipse. I often, to give focal interest to elements in my paintings, give a slightly darker value to the ellipse, like the halo around the painting, the corners and the edges. So I'm using this green. I think it's the same dark green I used for some of those leaves. And I think you'll see, especially by the end of the painting, how that just the deeper leaves and foliage surrounding those chickadees really gave them more focal interest. Now I am giving a bit more value, darker value underneath some of these branches. Think about, again, physics of light and just logically, if the light is behind them and maybe slightly above, we're going to have a bit darker little shading underneath some of these branches. Now, I also love to stress that I'm not making really lines. See how I make these little broken, I call it scumbling marks. I don't like solid lines. I just make little gestural marks, especially with branches and little fractured branches, breaking them up like I'm doing here. Obviously, they're going to go behind some of the foliage, so you don't want just a solid branch going all the way up your painting. And again, you examine nature. You'll see how this happens in the real world, and then you'll learn to emulate it even when you're painting interpretively like this. And I'm feeling good about this. It also feels really good that I saved that little sketch. I think it was from, gosh, probably when I first started sharing videos on this Monet Cafe channel. So I think perhaps it was a little sentimental and really sweet that I recreated it once and now that I'm in my new studio. All right, these little pastels that I just held up a second ago are called Prismacolor New Pastels. They're little sticks. They're typically long rectangular sticks. I often break them, and they're great for little fine lines and mark making. But I also stress, just as I did before with the other softer pastels, that I like to keep these fractured, gestural, broken lines as I'm painting. Notice I'm skipping areas sometimes and leaving blank sections. And I'm seeing, actually, as I'm painting, I'm seeing how it should grow and how it should go, where these elements should go. And it's just really kind of awesome that that's something that to me feels more like creating than me just painting from a reference image, when I'm literally determining and interpreting where elements are going to be in my painting. Now, I am adding a bit more pizzazz. I wanted a bit more of a golden glow. And that's another thing that just kind of happened as I was painting. I started to see, wow, there's a lot of green that was ending up back there, but I really liked the golden color. And I thought, let me imagine these chickadees being at a sunset scene. So they're nestled in these little trees and branches, and behind them is a glorious sunset. And this light is peeking through and negatively in between some of these spaces of branches and leaves. And here I'm imagining the same thing, that up above there could still be a little bit of sky showing. And this is a bit more turquoise than probably a sunset sky would be, but it was that original color that I really loved when I first got started with this painting, and I could still see little hints of that coming through. And I ended up loving this color palette. I just love the magentas, the greens, the golds, and the turquoise colors together. Now, this is a pastel pencil, and now I'm getting a little whimsical. I often, when I'm in a whimsical mood like this, like to just sketch random little linear marks. And I'm thinking of leaf shapes and really just organic mark making. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, you could even add little curves, but it's adding more to that fun style. There's a little swirl that I made there, along with the stencils. I don't want to cover those up, but I'm just adding enough visual interest to keep this painting fun and exciting. And I was having fun. This pastel pencil's a little bit lighter, and I felt like it was too light, so I stopped. It was also too yellow. I wanted more of those golden colors. So I come back with a lighter golden color in just a minute. Now I'm carving in some more leaf shapes, and what I'm trying to do is create depth. So by having that muted background behind them, that feels like there's branches and leaves and things very far away. And that's a great way to achieve that effect. Things far away are typically more blended. They're not as in focus or detailed. They're typically a little more neutral in color and not as dark in value. So by adding those darker leaf shapes and a little bit of highlights like I'm doing here on top, I'm giving dimension. It feels like there is depth to this forest scene. Here is that lighter golden color that I mentioned. The first one that I used was in my left hand. You got a peek of it just a second there. But this one is a little bit lighter, as you can see. And I want to put my lighter values of this buttery golden color just kind of haloed around the chickadees just a bit. And I'm keeping a very light touch. I can't remember if I've overstated that in this video yet or not, but I can't overstate it enough. You don't want hard pressured marks really ever in a pastel painting until you get to some of your final punchy sprinkle elements at the end. Then you can do your hardest mark making. Now, I used a bit more of the darker golden color, and I decided to use a little piece of chamois cloth to blend with. I wanted this sunset to feel a bit further away, just like the concept I said with distant elements. It's going to be a bit fuzzier, a little more blurred, and it causes the chickadees to stand out more because they're not competing with with texture with the background elements. Now I am using this other little sponge. It's kind of like a long kind of rectangular shape with little curves at the end, just to get in a bit more of that magenta color in just little fun areas that I'm intuitively, just placing wherever I feel like it will complement the final piece. And I'm really starting to love this color palette. I was just enjoying this. And that's, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, often I'll do these intuitive or meditative type of paintings when I've done a lot of lessons myself or created a lot of paintings for my tutorials. I need to do these things to avoid artistic burnout. Now you see I've been using that lighter golden color again for some interesting mark making kind of around the chickadees, and now I'm carving in a bit more of that deeper golden color. And I think you can see this painting just like a storybook, telling its story over time. And much like a story, you're not quite sure what the end is going to be like. And that's part of the excitement, right? Do I have any other people out there that just love reading a good novel? I'm actually, okay, here's a tangent alert. I'm writing a Christian thriller. And as soon as I find more time to get back to it, I can't wait to share some of my chapters with my patrons on my Patreon page. All right, back to painting. Now, this is a different tool. It's kind of like a big piece of foam. I think it's a piece of pipe foam insulation. I can't remember where I got this from, but I wanted to blend my edges just a little bit more. And the chamois cloth I used before to blend the center, it was not blending that well. And I think it's because I didn't have a lot of pastel down on the edges, and I needed something that could handle the coarse texture of the pastel paper. All right, so now I'm giving some more focal interest to the area around these chickadees. I wanted a little gentle light and shimmer. This is the Iridescent Pan Pastel, and I'm telling you at the very end, I take this painting outside in the sunlight, and you can just see the sparkle. Actually, I could see it with my own eyes. In real life, it really sparkles, but you can even see it a bit when I film it. Now, as I pull this away, you see that little gentle pattern there? I think that is so fun. And I decided to put a little bit of the magenta color, a bit more on the edges. I didn't want anything obviously too dark in that golden area that I've developed that looks like the setting sun. But man, these stencils are fun. I hope, if you're a patron of mine, I hope you try it. Now, here's my big head in the way with my crazy gray and whatever color hair. And I'm showing you this just to show you why I didn't show you all of the painting of the eye of the chickadee. You couldn't see it. I had to get my head so close to it. But it's very tough to use these big chunky pastels and get that little eye, especially the reflection. That's the little white dot. I'm going to try to show you a little better on the next chickadee. But now I'm just gradually doing a gradation of values, carving them around this chickadee's head. And really, these directional marks, the way you have your marks going, really does give form and dimension and makes these birds feel a bit more 3D. I also wanted to point out that if you notice the chickadee on the right, see, he's still quite underworked, right? I didn't overdevelop these chickadees. I just got in my basic values, gave them a little bit of form, and I waited closer to the end of the painting before I fully gave them my final mark making. There's a couple of reasons for this. One of them is because often if I was to have just totally done these chickadees just first, and then I did all of that pastel on the top, the foliage, all of the blending that I did, pastel dust will fall and kind of adhere a bit to the surface. So I always find that some of my final focal point elements will lose their luster and their brilliance if I produce them in full too soon. I hope that makes sense. Another reason it's good to wait is often your painting evolves a bit as you're working. So sometimes you can develop your chickadees or whatever your main focal point image is, and then you create the rest of your painting, and something about them doesn't match with respect to your color palette or your value selections. So I find it's best to match your focal point elements closer to the end to your final painting rather than the other way around. So now, as you can see, I'm giving just some little vertical and curvy marks, thinking about literally like if I was petting this bird, how would its feathers fall? And this is still a bit of the base, the foundation. Still some of these little lavenders. I had added a little bit more of that brownish color. And the lavenders are more for shadows. The little brownish colors like I'm adding now is really some colors that I saw in the birds. I looked at some real photos of chickadees as well as going from my sketch. And so I'm just seeing where there's these earthy colors. It also is a bit of color echoing. Even though I've covered up a lot of my underpainting, there is still some of it peeking through. There's still an influence there. So I like to echo that color, and that's why I added some of those browns. Now I'm zooming in here. I'm showing you how I'm using a pastel pencil. Now I really did have to sharpen this pencil. Birds have an eye surrounding, a perimeter to their eye, like a little edge or lip that often can get a little bit of a reflection. And you know, I was working on this little birdie and something just felt off. Here, I'm just giving a little highlight to the top part of the beak, and it was the eye. It was a little bit too low, and I thought about leaving it as is, but I thought, no, I got to fix this. So what I did is I just got a little paintbrush that's kind of stiff, and I brushed out much of the pastel, and I'm just going to redo it. I put in a little more of the dark eggplant color. Now I'm going to add that little highlight. I tried to purposely do this to where you could see how little and precise you have to be with that mark. And I don't know, just raising that eye up just a little bit really made a difference for me. And this is where it starts getting fun for me, when I can add just the little final marks on this chickadee that really bring him to life. I noticed that underneath his chin, I needed to bring it out a little bit with some of that dark little tuft of feathers, and gradually just start the layering process. And as I say with so many of my landscape videos even, we work dark to light typically with soft pastel. So it's best to get in your underneath layers, the things that are darker, and especially with animal fur and feathers, and then lay your lighter values gradually on top. Now, this is that one of the original colors I used for the chickadee. It's that muted, dark, neutral, almost like a neutral navy blue, but very dark. And I'm layering it a little bit over that eggplant color that looks almost black that I had mentioned. And you can see it's just starting to give that fullness when you layer the lighter values on top of the darker values. And I'm now looking for just little adjustments, little things that are really just going to spell out this species as a chickadee. And now I have a Prismacolor New Pastel, those little long rectangular sticks of pastel. And again, they're great for sketching. They're great for feathers, little mark making like this. You can see I'm using the little corner of it to get in. I don't want to do this everywhere, not all over the bird. I love the expression, if it's everywhere, it's nowhere. I heard artist Marla Baguetta, fantastic pastel artist, say that, and it always stuck with me. If I have these little marks all over the bird, it's just going to be too busy. I want my focal energy to be more around the face than some of the other elements. Always with people and animals, unless they're not the main focal attention in your portrait or painting, almost always the eyes and the face is where you want a bit more of your focal interest. Now I've switched to a little brown, and I'm giving little areas where I see things are a little bit darker. I made his little belly come out a little bit more. And I'm working on the feet, and I did want to make sure I had some commentary on the feet. I gave some little gestural marks at first, but now I'm giving a little dark where his feet are tucked under his little belly. I am going to lighten that up as I add more of my lighter value. Now I'm using that same little gray pastel. This one might be a little darker. I can't remember. The other one I think was lighter, just for a little reflection. And after I added it, I thought, this is a little lighter than I thought it was going to apply. And so I just used my finger just to soften it up just a little bit. And that helped to me, not just to, you see how it kind of blended the dark with that lighter color, and it definitely took down the brightness of it or the light value, but it also just took the focus down a little bit. So again, I don't want the feet to be so pronounced and have so much light value that it distracts you from the rest of the bird. Now, I lost this bird's tail with all of my layering of stencils and leaves and branches and things. So I'm just kind of, this is how easy it is just to add something. I already told you how easy it is to take something away with like a little paintbrush. You can usually brush it out, and you can usually softly add something in like this too. I don't want this with such hard pressure or hard marks that it just feels pasted on. I still want a little bit of that background kind of peeking through, and I definitely don't want any hard lines. So this is that little lavender color. I'm giving just little ideas of edges and just some fun gestural mark making. All right, now I'm going to take this dark blue. This is actually a really dark blue pastel pencil. I love to get my bird's feet and legs very thin. The other foot was kind of tucked under there, but the leg of this bird needs to be gestural and very fragile looking. As you can see, I added a little more highlight on his little toes as well. Now this bird, it's more of the same. I'm basically just going to do the same thing with this bird that I did the other one. Here you can see I added the eggplant color. Again, it looks almost black. And I don't remember if I mentioned this with the other bird, but underneath the beak is darker. And that's typically just because of the sunlight hitting more on the top and there being a shadow on the lower beak. So I'm doing the same thing on this bird, giving him a little highlight on the top of his beak. Here comes that little, oh my goodness, I almost got it wrong. I tap. This is how I find it. You can see here I'm actually tapping and releasing to find where my big old chunky pastel is actually landing. So it's a press and release kind of technique that I use to feel where the pastel is going to hit. And I definitely put my glasses on when I'm doing that. Now, around this little chickadee's eye, there was more dark. So I'm adding more of that dark muted blue and a little bit more of this eggplant color. The darkest areas were that little tuft of feathers coming right up from their beak and underneath their little their beak and their little chins, if birds have a chin. And that was really the darkest area. And because of contrast of value, that also enhances focal point energy. I have many videos where I talk about how to create a strong focal point or a beautiful focal point, and a lot of it has to do with contrast. There's multiple contrast elements. One is value. If you have an area in your painting where the darkest and lightest value are together, it causes high value contrast, and your eye will automatically go there. So you try to get that in areas of focal point. Another contrast area is, size. If something's way bigger than the rest of the elements in the painting, it's a high contrast difference. And so the larger element will get more attention. And that goes with color, higher saturated contrasting colors. There's just so many of them, but that's another video. I have a full video on that. And these little things are just rules. Like I always say, painting's easy once you know a few rules. They're not all that hard. And I love to encourage the beginner artist. You just have to paint, 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 have fun like we're doing here, and just enjoy this journey. And before you know it, you'll look up and go, oh my goodness, I'm an artist. As I've been going on and on here, I think you can see that I've been just gradually adding different little values and colors. And here I did fast forward a bit here because you already saw the first bird. And this is again where I am giving little indications of feathers. And I want to give little tufts of feathers here. But like I said before, just a suggestion. I'm not going to do this all over the bird, just a little bit on his little breast and in his face, of course, and softening up a few other little places here. But again, I'm just keeping my marks a bit more muted and less detailed in other parts of the bird. And the rest of this is just finishing marks. I'm examining where I might want a little more contrast, a little bit more definition and texture in some elements near the birds, like underneath that branch, and just looking at any little fine tuning I could do to enhance this image without overworking it. And that is a trick in itself. Many pastel artists always are saying, oh my goodness, I overworked my painting again. So I have advice for that, is to step away. And I definitely did that with this piece. I had to go grab some lunch or something. I was getting so into it. And finally I was like, oh my goodness, I'm hungry. So I did step away to take a break. And now I want to take this painting outside so you can see the sparkle. You can't really appreciate it here on my easel. And actually, colors are always better out in the sunshine. So let me take this into the sunshine in the front of my studio and you can get a peek at the sparkle. Can you see that? Can you see the glitter as I'm moving it around? And that's mostly from those iridescent pastels, the bronze color and the yellow color. And I just love the depth of the texture of this because of the stencils and the underpainting. And again, I absolutely love creating these artistic meditation episodes because I need it, and I really do believe that it is a wonderful release and therapeutic way to paint, and I think you will loosen up and love your results. Please let me know if you like these episodes. I try to bring them every so often. Also, become a patron if you'd like to get all of the extra content I'm always talking about. Check out my hundreds of other lessons here on the YouTube channel, Monet Cafe Studio, and as always, God bless and happy painting.